Welcome to another episode of this series, and this time I want to go a little bit into the UV depth of camera projection. So no fear, you don't have to know how to do those things, but I want to give you, of course, the background information, what's finally happened on stage or behind the stage. And so let's have a look. What I've done here, the projection camera is a camera that I have set up with the help of the camera calibrator. And I used this image here to finally find with my little grids here exactly the camera position. We go into that in detail later on. First of all, I want to give you the UV secrets here. And to go there, I have created this camera. I have deleted this camera calibration tag, so you don't have to worry what is finally going on here. This is now just a camera that sits in space where, so we hope, the camera that has taken this picture here finally, and I show you that, of course, because when I say this picture, it might give a misunderstanding. So this picture here was created with a camera. This camera had a position in space. And when I shoot now exactly this box here with the camera, and I replace then the camera with the projection camera, like a slide or a gel projector, and I replace this box here just with a cube, and I assume that the same optics is from the camera and in the projector. That means the same field of view that we have here in the object. Then the projection on this cube should resemble the card box in Cinema 4D. That is in a nutshell just camera projection. Nothing else, nothing more or less. And the more detail we have, the more we can finally simulate something. And it was used in many feature films. I think Terminator 2 was the first real blockbuster that has used this technology. And so when I go here now with the animated camera that I have here in my object manager, then I can go here to a certain degree around this cube here, and I stick here with my perspective change that the camera introduces. And the texture seems really to stick on it. And that is exactly what we want to have. The illusion that we get real stuff from reality into Cinema 4D. Okay, so we have the projection camera, which gives the point of view where the image was taken, and finally where we project it back to the box, so to say, and we have here an animation camera. The projection camera goes normally here into this texture tag. And when we have in the attributes manager and tags, then here in the field camera, this camera established and the projection set not to spherical or cylindrical, just to camera mapping. Then we get, after we pressed calculate, if we set this up from the scratch, exactly something like this, if all fits together as said before. So when I say we need exactly this camera and it needs to have exactly this position, then normally my suggestion would be go to layers, have an extra layer for that, and inside of layers lock it. Because in the moment this camera moves only a tiny little bit, you lose the projection here. And that's not funny, because to get this back is maybe a little bit work. And as you can see here, I have set up for the border here already an alpha channel exactly here. I have done this against my suggestions, all with JPEGs here, because if I have to send this stuff around, I have small files and I don't want to send OpenEXR files for that. Anyway, this is now the alpha channel, which I use to have, instead of the hard border from the cube, here a soft border. And soft border means here only that I can paint the border, and so I can paint here some deformations in it, and it looks more natural as if I would use the hard border of the cube, because then I get here a very sharp edge, and that looks always unnatural. But I go ahead of my own theme here. What we have here again is something that explains finally what happens to the UV. So long talk, I know. So I go now here to my texture tag again, and this time I use here this camera that is animated. I use this camera as texture tag camera projection, and of course I have to activate this again. When I drag this in, you will see the first change here. It's smaller now. That happens because this camera here, and I have to free it here from this lock so I can see some attributes. This camera here has 71.201 millimeter focal length. And this camera here is exactly 100. So it's smaller, and we can see this. The field of view here is smaller. It's exactly this camera here, not this one. And so the projection is also smaller. That is maybe something that is to keep in mind, because in the moment we change anything from the projection camera, we lose the illusion. So we can go now here to this camera, and you see it's exactly on the same spot. There is no change. And we take exactly the 71.201, copy that, go to our animated camera, and we type in here 71, or paste it in 71.201. And then when I click here, you see it's exactly, it fits again. And of course, the cage is now smaller, not the projection, because the camera looks in a different way. In the moment I move now this camera here, and I'll show you that first in this perspective, you can see that obviously the box moves away and the projection stays in the same way, because the camera looks now from a certain position and gives exactly this texture in the way the camera or the projector would see it. In the moment I switch here the camera to the projection camera as the one I want to see, and I move the animated camera again, the texture moves and the cube stays. I hope that makes sense, because that is one point that I want to bring across, so you understand more and more in depth what's going on here. So the main target of this episode is only to show you what happens finally to the UV. As we have done now exactly on frame 0 what the projection camera did to the camera that is animated, we want to take a look what happens if we check out the UV. And here we go. So I go to Body Paint UV Edit, and I have now here one UV mesh. That tells me not so much. But I go now here to the Show UV Mesh, and I go to the cube here. And you can see here with this texture enabled, where the camera sits for the projection, because it could be also here the complete alpha channel that I have for the back sides. This one here gives me now exactly the UV information from the camera projection. And now I have to switch here to my standard menu, because I have no timeline in Body Paint. Timeline, there it is. So when I go now and move this here around, that means you see the texture stays in this case because we look through the animated camera, but the UV cage here, the black one, that moves. And I will show you that without texture so you can see that in a better way. So to get here, of course, something inside that. And here I take the gray one. And that gives me here then the option to choose the gray. And you see here, of course, everything is away, but you got the idea already. And I get my timeline back, and now we play here again one time through. And you see that's the UV. It doesn't work as animation so well, but every time I let go, it refreshes it. And when I change the camera here, then it moves as well, based on only this animation here of that camera. It has no other idea if that is now the main camera or not. It's just that construction. I hope that makes a little bit sense, and you see the connection between the camera and what it does to the UV mesh based on how it looks to this cube here. And in the next episode, I want to take advantage exactly of this, because most of the time when we work in a team with different applications or whatever that might have not the option to take exactly this construction over, we want, of course, not to lose the camera projection from Cinema 4D. And when we have invested some time, this should be, of course, always given further. And when we have invested time to set up such a scene, then we want to have, of course, advantage from it, and so everyone can work with exactly the same data. To make that happen and to give you an even much deeper understanding about the whole thing here, see you in the next part.